Welcome to my channel, or welcome back if you've been here before. My name is Beth Ann. Today I'm doing a brief discussion of Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata, which I first heard about from Scott over at Gunpowder Fiction and Plot. It was in his September 2020 reading wrap-up, so I will link to that down below if you want to see what Scott had to say about it. And I read this on my Kindle, so I don't have a physical copy to hold up. Convenience Store Woman is a very short book. It's under 200 pages in the print version, I think. So I read it in 2 sittings in sort of a panic because I had to read it for book club and I hadn't read it yet. So it was a book club pick. And it was quite good. I think I liked it a little bit less than Scott. I gave it a 3.5 rating on Goodreads for people for whom that gives some context for. And yeah, so the main sort of thing that I didn't quite enjoy about it is just that the writing felt very repetitive. I feel like it would have gone much better as a short story, and potentially like a longer short story, but like definitely under 100 pages. I think the author could have easily accomplished what she set out to do in in a much shorter format. So it just started to feel like, okay, I get it. Is anything else going to happen? No, okay. As I was sort of reading the book. But that said, it was quite enjoyable. The writing style is sort of simple and clean, just very clear, which I really appreciate. So I guess I should talk a little bit about what the book is actually about. So in Convenience Store Woman, for folks who aren't familiar with it, we're following Keiko Furukura, who is a 36-year-old woman in the time of the novel, and she has been working in a convenience store for 18 years, and I pictured it as like a 7-Eleven because that's my favorite convenience store. But it's a convenience store that sells a lot of junk food and packaged drinks, but then also has some hot food options and some sandwich options, etc. And her whole life is organized around the store, and we're introduced very quickly to the fact that Keiko is not really someone we would consider normal. And to me, I think very deliberately, she's clearly neurodivergent in some way or another. So there's sort of an emotional way where she doesn't connect with people in the way that is sort of expected, and she's not interested in a lot of the markers of success that society really cares about. And so the convenience store gives her structure. Like, it's a contained environment. She totally understands all the rules. She understands how everything works. And she's able to really succeed in that environment and feel like comfortable there, and have colleagues who respect her and all of that. So she's really sort of at home. But the book explores sort of the tension between finding that sort of like structure and contentedness in something that society views as like not good enough. And so in the early parts of the book, her family has sort of given up on her. They love her and they spend time with her and everything, but they sort of know that she's never going to get married. She's never going to progress into a higher paying job or a more stable job. And the plot starts to really move when we're introduced to a coworker of hers, Shiraha, who in some similar but also some different ways is not conforming to society, and he's a grifter. He's a horrible person. We see nothing to like in him, or at least I didn't. And the two of them sort of start to have a little bit of a conspiracy for how to essentially con their family and friends into thinking that they're doing some of the socially accepted norms in a way that gets their family and friends off their backs, so that they can sort of continue in some of the areas that make them happy. So I really liked sort of that exploration of societal expectations and what it means practically and emotionally to carve out space for yourself that might not conform to those societal expectations. So I thought that was really cool. So parts of that are Keiko talks about having sort of a mask that she can put on, so she mimics other people's behaviors very deliberately, to try to fit in. For example, at the convenience store, she'll sort of pick and choose from different behaviors from her colleagues, to sort of create who she'll be, as a functioning unit of the store. And she also does it with her friends. So she'll sort of pick and choose mannerisms from her friends. Who, even though we say the word friends, they're not sort of emotionally intimate friends in the way that, like, I would recognize a really good friend for being. But she's sort of doing these very calculated moves so that people don't think she's too weird. Which I thought was just really interesting, and really very sympathetic, because I think all of us do that to one extent or another, just that Keiko is doing that for her entire life. And characters in the book sort of comment on it in various situations. So, like, one friend who has come back from several years living in a different town, I think, or maybe a different country, comes back and says, "Oh, Keiko, like, you've really changed." And we in Keiko's sort of internal monologue, she's like, "Well, yeah, you've been gone for a while. I've sort of, like, now I'm a 36-year-old woman, so now I've, like, chosen different behaviors to make me appear that way. Like, of course I'm different." And at one point, her sister, who has, for much of her life, provided really a fair amount of support and a fair amount of, like, will answer Keiko's questions about, like, what's the appropriate way to behave in this situation? Or, like, can you give me an excuse that other people will accept for, like, why I have my convenience store job and don't want another job, things like that. So her sister has been pretty supportive in that way. But at one point, her sister is sort of pushing back on this idea of, like, you've changed. And Keiko is just in her brain thinking, like, everything you're saying really sort of confirms my thought that we all mimic the behaviors of people around us. And I just thought that was so true. And it was such a, like, neurotypical thing for her sister to still be like, well, of course I'm like me and I'm unique. And Keiko's like, no, you're not. You imitate everybody just like I do. It's just that with me, it's this very deliberate thing. So anyway, so yeah, there were some really great things about that. And then there were, I think, some great comments about essentially the patriarchy and heteronormativity and women in the workplace. So just how much everyone in the story, even if they're not overtly talking about it all the time, how weird they think Keiko is for never dating, for never wanting to get married. And then once she does enter into her conspiracy with Shiraha, I don't want to give too much away, but she's associating herself with a man. And so everybody's perceptions of her change just, like, in an instant because of that, because she is doing the expected thing of, like, having a man attached to her. And so, even her family, like, they overlook all the negative aspects about him, or are willing to at least try, and are just like, yes, Keiko, has a man in her life. And it's just like, oh my gosh, like, that's so true. And it is very obvious in the book, because literature often takes things that can feel sort of subtle in our life and make them very obvious. But yeah, and then the way she's treated at work also instantly changes when they know that she is associating with a man in her private life. And her sort of her value and the respect that some of her colleagues have for her is lessened in some ways in the way that they talk to her after that becomes apparent. So I just really liked those pieces. I liked seeing those get called out in society. And of course, this is all very focused in Japanese society, because the character and the author are Japanese, and I think it takes place in Tokyo. But there, I mean, it's, those big themes are the exact same in the society I grew up in. So, yeah, so I really appreciated that. But I just really felt like, even though I enjoyed the writing style, I really am not a huge fan of books that could say what they want to say in a much shorter space. And so I really wish it had been written much more sort of tighter like that. But yeah, so that was my experience with Convenience Store Woman. Have you read it? What did you think? Go ahead and leave me a comment in the comments down below. I'm going to be watching more reviews of it from other folks now that I've sort of got my thoughts solidified about that book. All right, thanks for watching. I'll see y'all in the next video. Bye.